All right, this is part one of our Fuzz Club episode on the Slower project, and I'm very grateful to have Esben Willems here today to give us some insight on this album. You probably know him famously from Monolord. He's also the owner of Studio Berserk, and now he's part of the Slower project. So thank you very much for being here, Esben.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get into Slower a little bit. Where did the idea for this album come from? Because a lot of doom bands and metal bands, there's this idea of taking not heavy songs, a Britney Spears song or something, and dooming that song and making it heavier. Who would have thought that you could possibly make Slayer any heavier? Who came up with this wild idea?
It's an amazing idea. I love it. It's Bob Balch it's his brainchild.
Awesome.
And it's stemming from, if I got it right, it stems from when he had an online student, guitar student, that wanted to learn some Slayer songs, and he just tried South of Heaven and slowed it down for him so it should be easier to play. And it's like, this is really cool. I should do something with this.
Yeah.
And here we are.
That's awesome.
So
that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense though. So how were you approached, and how did this kind of super group form? Because it's quite the group of people. Peder from Lowrider, it's Bob from Fu Manchu, yourself from Monolord, Scott Reeder, who everyone knows, Laura Pleasance from Kalesa, and what was the other one? Amy from Year of the Cobra. So that's quite the group to form together. How did you all come together to make this? And all from kind of different bands, different backgrounds a little bit. So
I think Bob, he started this project with another drummer a few years ago, and he passed away, and it kind of halted right there, understandably. And then, according to him, I posted something about, hey, let's collab on whatever, on any of my socials, and he saw that and felt like, maybe I should. I like Monolord. I'll ask Esben, and he did, and I felt like, this is amazing. This is a great idea. Of course I want to try that. I'm always into side projects, and I'm always into trying stuff I don't know how the shape will be. Mm-hmm. And this was that project. I mean, recording this, the whole process of recording it was like so wild, because none of us really knew what this is gonna sound like at the end.
Yeah.
So it's strange.
As someone that runs, your own studio and produces albums and stuff, how important was like finding the right tone for this? Because slowing Slayer songs down is one thing, but finding kind of that right like level of fuzz so it sounds different from Slayer but more doom. How much was that part of the process of finding kind of the right tone and the right sound to some of these songs?
That part was super easy, because everyone in this project is right. They have their tone, they have their sound, and they have their voice, all of them.
Yeah.
I hope I do too. So I just went with that, and it all fell into place with that. We didn't have to do anything special to shape anything. It shaped itself.
Gotcha. Okay.
Based on who we are as musicians, and based on what this collab became because of that, our differences. Sure. And so it was easy. That part was easy.
Good. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, everyone does kind of have their sound, and everyone's kind of been making music in this scene for long enough that, I'm sure that they kind of have their own thing that goes with it. But Slayer, also Tom Araya's voice is iconic and such a big part of Slayer's sound. So what was the decision to use two female vocalists on this? Like, how did that come about?
We discussed vocalists, and we discussed not wanting to do the same thing. We wanted to differ as much as possible, basically.
Yeah.
And Laura's voice was she was the first one recording anything to this, and that was just amazing. It just fell into place. It was perfect. It was the perfect contrast to the overblown, heavy, slow everything else. And that just sat on top and just tied it together beautifully. And the same thing with Amy. So we started with just discussing how can we differ this from the original, because we didn't want to go with Tom Araya style vocals.
Right.
Obviously, that would be incredibly lame.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it adds this whole nother layer of like this kind of haunting doom layer to Slayer. I mean, it's one thing again to just slow the songs down, but to really like recreate like a doom version of them instead of just slowing them down, I think that made that album really, really key. You know, it was all the parts moving together that made it really special.
Thank you.
A lot more than just slowing
and
it
I
down.
agree.
You know? Yeah. So what was the process like for selecting the songs? Because they have quite the catalog, and there's people's favorites, and there's their big hits, and there's their lesser known ones. So what was it like picking just a small handful of songs for this?
I mean, same thing there. Nothing that was too obvious without being super obscure. And finding something in that. And as you say, I mean, anything Slayer is really good. You can just pick anything and it sounds good, and it will have a new shape and a new voice just by slowing it down and just by having another type of vocals on top of it. So I think Bob is the one that's suggested the most of the songs, Amy as well, and I just felt like I'm in for doing anything with Slayer or with these songs, because everything works. Everything will have a new meaning and context in this.
Did you try any other songs that just didn't work and you decided to scrap them, or was this it from the beginning?
This was it. Just fell into place trying it right away. And I think it was because we found the voice for the project from the first song. We just went with that. So everything else just fell into place because we felt like this works on any Slayer song. It was we can make it our thing, but it's still Slayer. But yeah,
gotcha.
And I feel the
same. Is there any other thought to like the next project? Is it a Slayer Part 2, or is it Metallica, or you got any other bands in mind? Or do you have any plans for the next phase of this super group?
There are plans. There are plans. Yes.
You're keeping them close to your chest?
Right. For now, yeah, I will.
Okay. Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it already. That'll be awesome, because this album is really good. I mean, if you didn't know Slayer, if you didn't know the songs, you didn't know the lyrics, I mean, it's its own thing. You know, it's really like kind of its own thing.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to tell everybody about this project? Some insights or some cool facts behind the scenes stuff, or anything you'd like to share with everybody?
For me, it was what you mentioned in the beginning. Like, we all know Slayer. We know all of the songs, and they're just ingrained in the back of our head. We know them by heart. So hearing these songs, I mean, recording drums to the first version of, I think it was South of Heaven, we recorded first, and that was super weird. It's like I couldn't really. There was a disconnect. I know this song. I've heard it a million times. I know this song in and out, but not in this tempo and not in this with this voice. That was super weird and really, really exciting, because I mean, I don't think I love Slayer, but I don't think I've realized how well written many of the songs are. All of the songs, the riffs are just brilliant, and they sound so good. And I think I've rediscovered quite a lot of them through this. Hearing them.
Yeah, it made me want to go back and listen to some old Slayer albums again, and kind of like hear like, wow, that's a difference.
Yeah.
So while I got you here, just to change subjects, I got to ask about if there's anything in the works for Monolord, but also I have to ask about your solo project that was just kind of announced, I think, like yesterday, maybe. So do you want to share any details about any of that with everybody?
We're doing a handful of dates with Monolord, taking a little bit easy for now, and any and all updates will come eventually.
Yeah.
Regarding my project, no, I was saying it feels odd in a good way, because I've never done it before. It's a new thing. It's really new being in this role, because I've always played in bands, because that's what I wanted to do since I was a kid. But then I had a bunch of songs, a bunch of misfit songs that didn't fit any project, that are just piled up through the years, that I liked. I felt like these are these are pretty cool. I like these. The odd songs that don't really fit anywhere still. And the pandemic came, and I felt like, hey, I wanna record this. And for once, I want to do everything myself. I don't want to. Yeah, I want to play everything, although I can't. I want to sing everything, although I can't, just to see what I can achieve within my limits. So it's kind of a social experiment on myself.
Awesome.
So I did that and very anxiously showed it to a few people, and they liked it. And then I showed it to a label, and they also liked it. And now the album will be released. First single tomorrow, which will be 2 weeks ago when this airs, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. Very cool.
Thanks. Me too.
All right. I think that's about it, unless there's anything else you want to share with everybody. But thank you so much for spending some time with me, and this project is so cool. So thanks a lot for everything that you do.
Thanks again for having me.
All right.
It's great.
All right, here we are, part 2 of the slower Fuzz Club episode. Before we get into it, I'll let everyone kind of go around and introduce themselves. We have a special guest today to give us some insight behind the scenes of this slower album. We've already kind of introduced it at the beginning of this episode, so I won't get into too much of what slower is, but it's the slowed down, doomified Slayer songs by this super group from the doom and stoner scene. So we'll get into what kind of that means a little bit, but Ryan, you want to lead us off?
Sounds good. I'm Ryan from High Desert Queen and Lick of My Spoon Productions.
Eddy.
I'm Eddy from The Endless, Lotoc, and Aiwass.
Peder.
Hello, I'm Peder from Sweden and the band Slower and the band Lowrider, and also just being a moron on the internet at times.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Aawks.
I'm Randy.
I'm Kris from the band Aawks, also from Novadol.
Awesome. All right. Well, Peder, thank you so much for joining us as the official member of Slower. It's nice to have you here and give us some insight into the back end of this thing. So right off the bat, where did this idea come from? Those listening, I talked to Esben a little bit about it, but from your perspective, where did this come from, and how'd you get involved in this Slower project?
Actually, I'm not used to having this role in a band, because most of my bands, even since like when I picked up a guitar when I was like 12, 13, I've been the one guy in the band who's like done everything and try to nag people to come to the rehearsal room and just get stuff done. I'm not saying that like the boys in Lowrider needs to be nagged, but yeah, I seem to be the propelling force in most of the projects I'm in.
Sure. And
here I was sort of like just called upon by Bob mid or even further into the project. Like, hey, you want to play bass on a song? I was just like, okay, what is it? So I was very much just like handed a test to do bass on one of his, like a demo, and midway through I was realizing what it was, sort of. As far, I mean, Bob has told this story before, but I was sort of amazed because I heard his sort of origin story of the whole thing after the fact. And as far as I've understood it, he was having this, he's a guitar teacher outside of being a guitar god. So he teaches to like people over the internet, and then also physically, like having actual students in his room. And I think this was him traveling to that student, or no, it was because he had commutes to the Fu Manchu practices. He was trying to teach this really young guitar student of his Slayer songs, because that's what I think she wanted. I don't remember. Anyway, he or she, there was as a human being who wanted to teach themselves Slayer songs. And it was, I mean, even for me, it was like that. It's way too fast. Yeah. So he was just like, "Oh, I'll just slow it down so I can, like, just maybe we can slow it down so we could be easier to grasp." And then as he was doing that and listening to those like slowed down versions on his commute, he was like, "Hey, there's something here." And then jokingly, he started like you know, saying like, "Oh, someone should start a band that sounds like that, and they should call it slower," like haha.
Yeah.
And then he was actually forced into like I don't remember who it was, but someone told like, yeah, that person is you, and you need to do it. So he just started, and it was for the longest while. It was just like this idea, and I think he just like him and Esben started working on it. So there were like drums for like 5 or 6 tracks when they reached out to me, and I think it might be for the fact that I think Scott Reeder, who played on one song, I think he had injured his hand and was like going through operations and couldn't really track bass at all. So I think that was my lucky lucky shot that like, oh, and we don't have Scott Reeder, like who are we asking? And me and Bob have been doing a lot of stuff on the side of me doing like videos and graphic design work for both Fu Manchu and then Sun and Sail Club. So he was just like, and he really dug the last Lowrider album, and yeah, we've just stayed friends. So I guess he was just like, you want to try? And I was like, sure, but I've never listened to Slayer. And in a way, he was like, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about it is actually, I think, at least for my part, it was the introduction to Slayer that I needed. Because I mean, I've heard Slayer and I've grown up with people like some of my best friends being like totally addicted to and like idolizing Slayer, like bowing to the altar and everything. So I mean, I've listened to Slayer by like osmosis. You could say like it's been in like the background of every party and in every car and every tour bus since I was a kid.
Sure.
But I've never like actively sat down and listened to them. And here I'm just hearing these riffs coming out of the speakers. He's like, fuck, this is so rad, but I don't recognize anything. It's not like, oh, that song or that riff. It's just like, it's like completely new songs. And it sounded surprisingly a lot like the like heavier stuff that Sun and Sail Club did. So I was just like, oh, this is rad. And I started hearing like bass parts on it. So it came, we started with War Ensemble.
Okay.
That track. And it was like, it just fit my playing style really well. Like, and there was a lot of room in the way they were playing already that sort of left a lot of room for the bass. But the cool thing about it was that there was no vocals on it, and since I didn't have a reference to it, I didn't know where the vocals were supposed to be. So it's like just like, you know, these 10-minute tracks or 12-minute tracks of instrumental, just like, so I just like put as much bass stuff into it as I could, and then when I actually got the vocals on, I was like, damn, did I do too much? Because it's like the bass is really like front and center and doing a lot of stuff in a lot of the tracks. But
well, that's what's interesting about this album, I think, to me, is that it's a lot more than just Slayer songs slowed down. I mean, you know, it really has its own personality. It has its own, you know, tone and structure to these songs. They're reimagined Slayer songs. They're not slowed down only, you know? And then the vocals on top of it, the female vocals and all that kind of stuff, just like, it's really so much more than just a slowed down Slayer tribute, you know?
No, it's so cool because I mean, I literally for at least like 5 of the or 4 of the 5 songs, I didn't even recognize them when I was listening to the original version. I was just like,
yeah,
oh yeah, that is that riff, and that is okay. Yeah, I do recognize it now, but it was still like, but I mean, I'm biased and also sort of maybe blasphemous, but I mean, to me, I'd rather listen to slower because it's just like it's more my vibe.
Yeah,
and I guess it's the appropriate like BPM for my brain to just like take it in, because for me I can now hear like the riffs that I taught myself playing to the like Bob's guitar tracks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can hear them in the Slayer songs, but it's literally like it's sped up. For me, it's like the 100% the reverse. Yeah. I can hear the slower song like barely because like the riffs are played so fast. I'm just like, I'm almost like, how the fuck could Bob decode all the notes that are being played, so we got like everything that's in the slower songs. Because the Slayer songs were super cool, but I can't make out all the notes. It's like, also I'm not like that great of a musician. That when it's that fast, it's just like maybe someone else play that.
Yeah.
So
I'm interested to hear what like Ryan, Eddy, Aawks, you guys think about this album, because I grew up on Slayer and Metallica and Megadeth and stuff like that. So, I was a big Slayer fan for a lot of years, and like just hearing about this project and then listening to it and hearing just like how different it was and all that kind of stuff, like it was tricky at first because you're so used to hearing Slayer a certain way, and then just like really enjoying what it was. I don't know about you guys, but how big a Slayer fans you were or are, and what your initial like first thoughts were on this project and hearing it the first time.
I know that I can speak for the side, probably like Peter. I didn't really listen to Slayer, and I know who they are. Obviously, they're legendary, and I've always respected them, but I've never sat down and listened to a record. I've just heard some songs, and I'm like, wow, that must be Slayer. That's heavy or whatever, right? And to be honest, when I heard there was this slower project, it's kind of interesting to hear Peter say it almost sounded like it started as a joke. Someone should play this stuff slower and call it slower, because it's exactly what, when you hear the band name, you're like, really?
Yeah.
Like that's. I was kind of laughing about like, well, I wasn't a huge Slayer fan, and so why would I want to listen to something Slayer songs slower? Until I heard it. I think I heard the first single drop, and I was blown away on that. It because I knew who was in the band, and I thought was really cool was the first thing I was listening for was like, okay, well, obviously I think Slayer, I think of like really intense guitar riffs and drumming, but I know Bob Balch is doing this, so I'm going to really listen for like Bob's guitar tone. It's like totally there, but totally not there. It's totally something different, I felt like, than what I'm used to hearing Bob do. But Peter reminds me of the Sail and Surf Club. It does sound like some stuff of that. Now that I'm thinking about it, it does sound like some things he's done tone-wise there. But I love the record, and I would probably also rather listen to this record than Slayer, just because I don't listen to a lot of Slayer before, and I really dug this. Where I even went like 2 or 3 songs after I heard that, I go, damn, this is badass. I went to go listen to the Slayer song, and I was like, okay, I'm impressed. It's just not my jam. It's not what I normally listen to. So that's my perspective on that. Some of you guys might be like hardcore Slayer fans, and you can make fun of me when we get off of this that I don't listen to Slayer. But that was my perspective. And it was interesting because I was not interested in really listening to it, to be honest, at first. And I'm really glad I did.
Yeah.
I used to be a pretty big Slayer fan in my teens and early 20s, and when I found out about this, like a supergroup making a Doomstall and like making it all their own, I was really excited. Especially when I first heard War Ensemble, because that's probably my favorite track from Slayer. And this is crazy, like it's so good. Like the tones, the guitar tone, bass tone, all those wicked solos Bob's doing, like it's wicked, man. I just love it. It's wicked.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think for me, I'm probably like a middle of the road Slayer fan. Like they've got songs that I love, but I never really dove into their albums and became like a massive album listener of theirs. But I, like both Peter and Ryan, had friends that were really into them, and still have friends that are obsessed with them, actually. So I've seen them live, and I've definitely heard them a ton. The difference for me, like I like both bands a ton. I would listen to slower probably more often, but there's definitely a time and place for Slayer. Like if I'm going to destroy something, or set someone fire, or get a or whatever, I don't know, then I'm going to put on Slayer. But if I'm like doing 99% of the other things I do in my life, I'm going to put on slower, because I'm a huge fan of melody. And the one thing that always kind of shied me away from Slayer was the lack of melody. There's a ton of amazing riffs. There's so much like, just pummeling drums, and it sounds amazing, but I need melody and harmony so much. So I was really impressed with the vocal interpretations, because they had to make up those melodies, right? Like they're I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for them really, but it was, yeah, that was one of the more shocking things when I like heard our rendition being done, and then I went back to listen to the original. It's like, oh, they
Tom
like,
sings like he sings a melody, but it's a limited amount of notes.
right.
Where the
Yeah.
girls are singing like legit written, well crafted melodies, and they sound great.
Yeah, and I now know what the words are.
Yeah, that was the weirdest thing for me too. Was like I was listening to it this morning when I was working out, and I was like, "That's what he said." I've listened to this song like 1,000 times. I didn't know that's what he was saying.
It's crazy to me to hear, because they did an amazing job. These beautiful vocal lines and beautiful melodies singing about like decapitations and like super morbid, you know, like things, and it was kind of cool. I really dug it.
Yeah. I heard every time for some reason I always hear her sing "Incestuous Fathers" every time, and I'm like, Jesus, this is some tough shit.
Yeah.
Depends who you're asking.
Yeah. I've been looking at my porn history.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I was and Peter, when I was talking about like I sat and listened to the record to really. I knew all the people, you know, from other bands on, like I knew you from Lowrider, and of course Reader, and you know, everybody involved. And so I was like, well, I'm going to listen to this, and I bet I can make out their parts. And it was interesting that I really couldn't. There's some definitely solos. I'm like, okay, that's 100% Bob Balch, you know, like that's their fuzz tone, everything, right? But was that like a conversation? Because this is not just a normal like, hey, I need Bob Balch to be you, I need Peder to be you, Esben to be you. Like this is kind of paying homage to Slayer. So was there like a discussion on tone and things like that in it about this record?
No, I mean, I don't have an idea of what Bob was expecting really. I think he's always doing like 5-6 different things.
Yeah.
He's so prolific that I think he just like, that's where I think him and me were very different. He's very allowing, and I wouldn't say I'm not allowing, but I work on like the one thing at a time. So for me, I'm usually kind of laser focused of what I thought that thing is going to be. So I'm trying actively not to like meddle too much when people are with the people I'm playing with. Whereas I feel whenever I've done something with him it's just like, yeah, do your thing. Just like, here, go nuts, like do whatever you want. And so that was the first thing that happened when I got War Ensemble, was just like, there was guitars and drums, and I mean it was the whole song. It was, I mean, I think there were solos and everything, and there was no guide bass, and I didn't know the song, so it was literally like I got total creative freedom with it, which was cool. And I think that actually was maybe I like that this sort of lack of pressure, both from Bob, but also from like not knowing Slayer and them not being like the gods I grew up with, and having a lot of like baggage with it. I just play the bass part that I heard, what was like the best for that thing, which ended up like on it wasn't on War Ensemble, it was one of the other tracks where I just realized like I went from going with the guitar to like going against it and starting to play like just a more melodic thing, where I heard like the thing the riff is doing now, if I'm doing like this ascending bass line, just more like getting chords in there, I was like, I'm playing the My Name is Jonas bass on this right now. And I texted Bob like, just so you know, I'm putting down the exact bass line from My Name is Jonas.
That should go with the Slayer song pretty well.
Yeah, because I was just like, because that makes sense, and it was a nice sort of it's just like 4 or 8 bars of like, because first it's just like this chugging thing, and then it's just like gung 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 gung, this going up, and it really fits. But I'm pretty positive that's not even close to what the bass is in the original, and just not even knowing what the original bass was supposed to be, or even like vocal melodies or anything. It just was very freeing, because to me it felt like we're doing a record of like original songs.
Yeah.
Which
yeah.
I mean, so ignorance is bliss, I guess, when it comes to tracking stuff like this.
And there's some definitely magic in that trust that Bob had in you. You know, like, hey, just here you go for it. And there was, I think, a lot of magic happened in that for sure.
I mean, with that said, I felt the pressure because I mean, full transparency. If I have one god when it comes to like bass playing, it is Scott Reeder, and knowing that, like, oh yeah, okay, so I'm supposed to record some bass on this record that already has like Scott on one of the tracks. It's a little bit like, I don't know, going up in like a weightlifting competition after Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's just like, okay, I guess I'll give it a shot. And so I was like reluctant to send it away without me being like 100% happy with it. And I really tried to like outdo myself, and just like, I mean, not like overly like overthink it, but still like I just didn't want to. I'll go in and jam a little bit and send it over. I sat with that one for like a while, and made it to where I was just like, oh, this is done. I'm stoked about it. I can't do anything better, and if they don't dig it, then fine. I'm happy with being like, no, we'll let Scott do it instead. But both Bob and Esben were just like so positive, and when they got to like, holy shit, and we're just like so kind, and that has sort of been a sort of thread through the whole project of everyone being super positive and just supportive, and just yeah, it's for a band that's never played together and has never been in the same room. It's like one of the most positive experiences, like chemistry wise, I've been a part of. So it's awesome.
I tried to ask Esben about like finding the right tone for this project. I mean, he's a producer, you know, and just curious about how important is finding like the different tone. Are you trying to replicate Slayer's tone but slower? Are you trying to come up with your own? And, you know, like, what was that like? And he basically was like, well, you know, we have all these different amazing players in this group, and they all have their own, you know, tone and personality and stuff like that. And it sounded like he kind of just wanted to let that shine through a little bit. And I think it does. I mean, I think you can hear, you know, certain players' personalities come through in some of this stuff. And it's not just, like I said earlier, it's not just a slower Slayer, you know. It doesn't have that Slayer tone to it. It's got everyone's personality in it a little bit.
He was very much like, that was almost, I don't know, like he was putting up a plaque on the wall with like wise words of like, he didn't want to fuck with anything. And he was the most important part for him because he mixed and mastered the whole thing as well. In that process of mixing and mastering and sort of just trying to, I mean, he was semi-producing it as well, because since he's like choosing takes and taking creative decisions with a mix, but it was very much a back and forth. He sent the mix to everyone, and he wouldn't give up until everyone was happy with like the whole track and also their part. And I think I was maybe the most like annoying, because I wanted like the mix to sound like my demo, which was pretty much just like a wall of guitars and bass. Like everything was so loud, and I know that is not how you mix
you
a
guitar and bass players, man. You're all the same.
Yeah.
Same.
And I know that's not how you like supposed to shelve mixes and like the way it should a correct mixes. But I had the same like arguments and discussions with Daniel, who is mixing all the Lowrider records, and yeah, I know there's like audible sighs sometimes, but Esben was so nice through the whole process and very respectful of each and everyone's like point of view and just their creative decisions. So I, for example, once was just like, I think that like that vocal thing is like, I can hear that it's a little like off sync or whatever. And he was like, yeah, I think it's cool. It's like it feels alive. And I realized like, yeah, he's right. It shouldn't be like too polished either. So it just should be like he let everyone and everything just breathe. So I think that's why it feels, even though we've never been in the same room like recording it, it feels way more organic, and that I think that's a lot thanks to him.
What was the song selection like? Was that a Bob thing, or did you guys have a vote? Or
100%. No, for me it was just like here are the songs.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that those are the names of those songs that I don't know. So I mean, again, it's sort of like I feel like an absolute idiot. It's like being, I don't know, invited to like Buckingham Palace and being like, oh, who's that lady with the crown?
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know. I'm just being an absolute ignorant idiot. But in a way, I couldn't change that, and I just have to embrace my perspective of like coming from something completely different and adding what I do best to this thing.
Sure.
And I think that's maybe why like this thing, this sounds like its own thing, because like, yeah, some of us don't have the same sort of history with Slayer.
This will definitely be my overall opinion as well. Kind of what you're saying is the idea, like Ryan, not a Slayer fan, but heard Slayer a million times. So there is that predisposition sound in my head of what Slayer is. In the idea of like how Johnny Cash took a Nine Inch Nails song and made it
100%.
You now had two separate entities. It may have been the same song, but it was two fully made pieces that have different experiences within them. And this is how I felt overall about this. You guys organically were able to let that chemistry and sound flow, and it became its own thing. Maybe a Slayer song, not a Slayer song, and it's quite wonderful. So thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah, I just think like if you want to listen to Slayer, that there's plenty of records and YouTube clips and whatnot. It's like we don't there's no need or market in this world for a like really good Slayer cover band that sounds like Slayer. There's like we're good. But I think most of like my favorite covers are covers that sound like completely different than
Agreed,
the original.
I think that's always the case, and even more so with an album like this. You know,
I mean, sorry, I'm eating candy because I'm that person. It's late, and there was a bag of candy here. Also, I'm 12, but yeah, but yeah, I was thinking like I've always felt like that, where like if you're doing a cover, then make it your own, or just don't. One of the worst things I think I've done ever is us back in the day. With Lowrider, we were asked to do like be a part of a compilation album where we were like covering 70 songs, and I really dug Leafhound back then, so I figured like we'll cover Leafhound and Freelance Fiend. They're like their biggest song, and we did just like that error of covering it sort of like we're playing it the song like they do, and it just sucks. I mean, it's not bad, it's like it's okay, but it's like that there's no place for that song to exist.
I always feel like what's the point of this? And I was actually just listening to an interview with Josh Homme today, and he was like, it kind of feels like you're going like, hey, do you want to hear like the 20th best version of this? You know, like if you're trying to just rip it off and just trying to like reproduce what this other band already did, like, do you think people really want to hear you just, you know, try to be as good as this other great band? Like, make it your own, put your own flavor and stuff into it. And this is even more than that. Like, if you know, this is just like a completely different thing. Some of these songs like are almost unrecognizable unless you just recognize like this one riff or this one lyric or something. They're almost unrecognizable from the original.
Yeah, I think that's the point, that to contradict the thing with the thing I'm the least proud of doing a cover of. The most proud I am covering, at least so far, besides this, but is we did with like an early demo of what then would be the band IR Droid. It was just me and Tommy from Dozer and the drummer from Dozer who was like trying out stuff in their studio, and we recorded first an original track and then also a cover of Steve Miller Band and Serenade, that track, because I always loved that track, but it was like I hated the production and I just heard like there was a different song in there that I was like, and I realized like we can just do it, and that is still like it's like a one take. We didn't overthink it. I just had like a vision of what it could be, and then we just record that. And Tommy being Tommy, he was just like, can you play this thing? And he was like, okay, and then he just like went and aced it, and the solo on it is just amazing. But that song doesn't sound like even remotely close to the original, but it has like the essence of it, and I think that's always the way you should approach doing covers. It's just like do something that's wildly different and your own, otherwise don't.
Or don't. Peder, I wanted to ask you about the artwork. I know that you've had a hand in a lot of like great artworks over the years, including Lowriders and Blues Funeral stuff and the post wax and all that kind of stuff. What happened with this one? Was this one of your creations or
what happened?
Well, sorry. What's the story?
Like what the fuck, Peder?
What the fuck happened here?
Well, I was definitely a part of this, but okay. It was. I mean, we had an illustration that a buddy of Bob's did, but it was like this kind of low resolution black and white illustration. That is what you're looking at, essentially. But we just realized like this is very cool, but it doesn't really work. A black and white album cover apparently is like the worst thing you can do for sales these days. Oh, really? If you want it to pop, it's just like we were all thinking it was like, oh, it's cool. It's like
if this was in black and white, I would have assumed it was like a black metal Slayer cover band instead of like a Doom Slayer band.
That was also the thing when because we all wanted it to be like it shouldn't look like a like Doom or Stoner or Sludge logo. It should be like reminiscent of the style or like the whole aura of like what like where Slayer is coming from. But first of all, we were like trying out just doing like the Slayer logo, but it's saying slower, and then you realize like, oh, that's one surefire way of getting sued. And also it felt just like, oh, but that is the visual representation of like doing the cover exactly the way it sounds on the original record. That's just like there's no interesting in that. So I just started toying around with like stuff that worked with this specific illustration. I knew that like I had, I mean it's so busy that there wasn't like a lot of space for a logo to exist, but I still wanted to be big enough so it doesn't like you could actually read it. I tried out a lot of like these typefaces and like typography that definitely was more on the like a collection of branches, kind of like that kind of typography. I don't know if you've seen that that meme where someone just like took a picture of like a dried out shrubbery and said like, I love that band.
Yeah, or like an old cracked leather couch or something. And
I tried that first and realized like it doesn't really, you can't read that. It doesn't make sense. So we after like I don't know 8 or 10 iterations of stuff, ended up with something like this, and then just started customizing it. And I dig that it's sort of, for me, if I'm just squinting at it, it's more like early Sepultura rather than like which I kind of dig, because I don't know if you've seen like those early Sepultura records, like the band pictures of them. They're like so cute. They're so young, and they've got these torn up jeans, and they're like with marker they've like drawn demons on their jeans and shit. It's there's being so like serious about being evil, and it's so fucking cool. And you know that once you guys calm down, you're gonna make Bloody Roots, and you're pretty much gonna do the best like song ever. But yeah, I mean I've got a lot of love for all the visual sort of like the style. I don't know what you call it, like the whole world of these kind of records. So I didn't want to make something that looked like a joke or was making fun of it in any way. It's just, I mean, it should be just like how I felt about hearing these Slayer songs. Like if you don't know what Slower is, and you don't know the joke and the initial story, and you just like see this record, and you should be like compelled to like, oh, that looks cool, and listen to it.
Yeah.
And then you might figure out like, oh, it's like, haha, the pun of like, it's Slayer songs played slower.
This does seem like its own thing. Like you could see this and have no connection to Slayer at all and be interested enough to listen to it. Whereas if you were to just parody the Slayer logo and say slower, I think that people would be like, oh, this is just like, you know, a cover Slayer album or whatever. And then you're like constantly tied to that, I feel like. Whereas this is kind of its own thing. It kind of lives in its own world outside of Slayer somehow.
Yeah, I was actually relieved when Bob sent me this illustration because I felt like by then I've started to feel like I've forgotten about the initial joke, and I had already tracked like War Ensemble and that whole trip of like knowing that what I'm playing now is going to be judged by Scott Reeder hearing this. So it's sort of like it has become, by then it become like a real thing where I was just like, and seeing that illustration made it even more like, oh, but now this feels like its own thing now. It started to like also look as serious as it had started to feel. So even if it started out as a joke, by now all of the people in the band were like taking it very seriously. We're like, no, we want to make this thing the best it can be. It shouldn't be like a sort of like, haha, we're playing like Kiss covers but like we have pink makeup instead. It's not, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be anything like that.
Right. You had mentioned getting sued. Have you heard anything from Slayer about any of this?
We haven't actually, as far as I know, but I know that this is how ignorant I am. The ex-guitarist from Slayer actually reposted it on his Instagram.
Oh, nice.
And thought it was awesome.
Sweet.
And I know that Bob sort of just was like, oh, this happened. So I mean that we live in a world where everything is connected. So I mean, hopefully they will hear about it and hopefully they will approve of it. I mean, I think that is maybe the moment for Bob that I had with Scott just the other week when in a group discussion, he just like said, "Oh, you killed it." About my bass playing, and I was just like, dude. I mean, I'm not. You might notice I'm kind of like trying to be the cool guy, and I was just being very transparent with like, dude, it means a lot. Like you literally taught me how to play the bass by like listening to your record. So I mean, it means a lot. And I mean, he's the nicest and kindest. If you ever talked to him or heard him, he's like the most chill, humble guy, and the furthest from like a rock star or anything that you would think of. So he's very approachable and super nice. So I mean, but yeah, to me personally, it meant like everything to hear that he dug what I did on this record.
Are there any plans? I already asked Esben this, but I'll see what you say. Are there any plans for Slower 2 or a take on a different band or more Slayer songs or anything?
You know what?
Faster. Play faster.
I mean, there are tons.
Slayer even faster.
I don't know if there's a market for that. Maybe.
Yeah,
just like
no,
be over with the song faster.
Yeah, it's the punk version of Slayer songs.
No, but and I actually didn't know this guy because we haven't talked for a couple of days, but I saw in like the Instagram comments today like, oh, is there going to be more? And then Bob said like, we're already working on the next one. So apparently we are.
Nice.
I don't know, but since I was kind of late to the game, like working on the first one, it's not weird that Bob has been like working on like what kind of songs would work for another one. Mm-hmm. But I mean, we all are so stoked on how the first one came out that I mean, it would be weird if we didn't do anything more. And since like doing a record where there's 5 songs on it, we're going to be able to do a lot of records and still not do the whole like discography.
Sure. Yeah.
Which song did Scott Reeder play bass on? Was there one track with it?
It's the last one, South of Heaven.
Oh, okay. Well-
that was actually the joke. That the record was supposed to be called "The South of Heaven," and just be like, I don't know, that we were like in the hell below hell. But yeah, it became a little bit too jokey. but that was the working title for the album.
Right on. Yeah, I noticed the bass playing that your bass playing on the Antichrist, man, it was wicked. Like you're doing something opposite than what the guitar is doing, and your bass tone sounds like Geezer Butler or something. So wicked job.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's well distorted, but that's also why, like in the mixes, I was fighting to keep all the low end that's in there, because it is very distorted, but it's like almost like this I don't know, like a bit crush overtone kind of vibe to it. But if you keep all the low end, it just still feels like it's just Ampeg like speakers being pushed to like the max.
Yeah.
Whereas the first mixers we got, it was maybe more traditionally mixed, like a Slayer would be mixed, where like, yeah, you cut out a lot of like the super low end in the bass, and then I was just like, you need to make it warmer, like warmer.
Yeah.
But I mean, that I'm so happy with how the mixes came out. It just, weirdly enough, he just made everyone sound loud at the same time.
Yeah.
So I can hear everything that everyone's playing, and it's kind of miraculous because everything is kind of a extra everything all the time.
Yeah, this couldn't have been an easy one to mix. I mean, it's a wall of everything, and it sounds great. I mean, when you have that much fuzz and guitar and low end and bass, and his drums still thump, it's really, really good. But the frequencies had to be awesome. I mean, you had these angelic voices on top of this.
I think that's actually helping a lot.
Sound. I think that gives you more space.
Yeah,
that definitely gives that gives Esben more space to work with in the mix, and I think it came out really, really well.
Yeah, that's the cool part, because I mean, we had the way we recorded it. It was like they were done with guitar and drums pretty much. They were like, maybe he was redoing a solo or something, but it wasn't that really where there was like a massive hole in the mix. When I got it, it was almost, when I put my bass down, I was just like, this is kind of like, I don't see where we can fit vocals in here. I was like, we should release this as like an instrumental record. These tracks are so cool. And then I got the because they were working on the vocals like way later on most tracks. And then when I got them, like it just made sense. I was like, oh yeah, that's how you fit them in there. It's just like they're not trying to be in the same like mid mush of like bass and fuzz. It's just like, no, it's like floating on top of everything.
The frequencies are much higher, so it sits right on top nicely. Mm-hmm.
Whose idea was it to include the female vocals? Because I think that it really worked well also.
Thing is, I know that Bob, the same time as he asked me if I would play some bass, was like if I could try doing vocals as well. And I was too scared to even try that. But I think he was maybe asking me because at least with Droid and like nowadays with Lowrider as well, I tend to like sing kind of calmly, and it's not that the sort of like classic like rock voice.
Yeah.
But I think that it was 100% him, like inviting them, and I think that was maybe the best call.
Yeah, I think so too. I keep thinking about it, and I talked with Esben a little bit about it, and it's like, you know, Tom Araya has such a distinct voice, and then when it's slowed down, it's like, what do you do there? And I think that your vocals probably would have worked, and there's probably a few others. I don't know. There's probably a short list of bands that probably could have had vocals that worked, but it's just like I would have probably not thought of putting the female vocals over it, and it just worked so well. It was perfect. It just like another reason that this is like so different from Slayer, and not the carbon copy slowed down version, you know?
Right. And I mean, we don't need another dude playing rock music. It's just like there's enough of us anyway. So I just felt it was amazing having two of the best like female vocalists around. Just
it's great.
Again, getting to do entirely their own thing. I think maybe that is like the thing that shines through this project the most. It's just like the you can hear that everyone just got to do their thing, and that's it's a really a blessing, and I can't thank Bob enough for like the opportunity.
I know that the stoner and doom scene has embraced this album wholeheartedly. I've seen nothing but very positive feedback and comments on it. But what has the Slayer and metal community thought of this? Do you know?
I haven't like combed the internet, but it is kind of funny, like seeing the Slayer bros.
Yeah.
I mean, any type of fan that is that sort of devoted into one thing, it's just like any like. I think that is the thing with Slayer, that they have those type of like diehard fans that aren't fans of heavy music really. They're fans of Slayer.
Yeah.
And then like and nothing else. It's like Iron Maiden fans. They're not interested in anything but Iron Maiden. And I mean, for me, really, like besides maybe like hearing Rain and Blood like a gazillion times, for me, like my biggest the thing with Slayer that I played the most is this clip on YouTube with the Slayer kid. Have you seen him?
I don't
I
think so.
have.
Slayer.
Yeah.
It's from an interview. He's like he's the I think one of my most watched clips ever, because it's like a comfort thing where I just like whenever I just want to feel a little bit better, I just go watch that clip. It's this guy who is just like he's talking about like his love for Slayer and he can't really put words to it, and he's like, and then he's like, you know, when you see someone on the other side of the street with a Slayer T-shirt and you're just like, Slayer, and it's like you know.
I've been to a couple Slayer concerts, and that absolutely 100% happens the entire night. Everywhere you go, it's just people shouting Slayer for hours, and that's it. That's all that
And I
happens.
think that's just fucking beautiful. And I mean,
Yeah.
any band would be so lucky to have fans like that.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
But it is also a type of fan that is 100% not interested in someone doing slower covers
Yeah, I
of
can imagine.
their favorite songs. It's just like why?
Yeah.
I don't know. It would be like trying to get Taylor Swift like fans to embrace. I don't know. Here's death metal versions of like her best songs.
Right.
It would be like, thanks, no,
No.
we're not
Yeah.
interested. So yeah, it. But yeah, I've seen comments from people who maybe aren't familiar with anyone in the band, who are just like, there is no reason for this to exist. It's just like, this is just bad. And it's like, there's like, I heard the first opening of the first song is like rough. and it was
Oh,
just like, yeah. So there's definitely like, it's the internet. People are always going to troll. They're always going to hate, and you just need to be like, I don't know. That's why whenever you do music or anything creative and put it out there, if you don't feel stoked about it yourself, you don't do it for yourself, then like don't release it, whatever you do, because the internet is just going to like poke at the exact like most sore spot on your ego.
Well, you would think that like heavy is heavy. Like if you like heavy, you're just gonna like heavy shit, and it's like it couldn't be further from the truth, because like liking Slayer and how fast they play is so far from liking Doom and how slow they play. You know.
Yeah, and also people just love to hate on something.
Sure.
It's just like, you know, I realized this late in life, but you realize like growing up, it's just like, oh, it's people when they don't know who they are, they can define themselves by what they aren't, and that people realize like some people don't even grow up, and they do that all through life. Like they don't define themselves by, they don't want to find out like, what am I good at? What do I love? It's like, no, I hate Chelsea, or I hate the Mets. It's just like that's what defines me is what I don't like, and I don't fucking like people who play Slayer songs slow. Don't mess with my Slayer.
Yeah.
So I mean, I do understand where they're coming from. I feel their pain. I'm just like, okay, you can't enjoy nice things, I guess. That's just sad. But I mean, there's no, you can't debate that. It's just like, oh, okay, sorry, go listen to Slayer. They exist.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anybody else got any questions or anything, or comments on the album, or final thoughts on Slower?
No, other than saying thank you
live?
again for giving a record. Oh yeah, live. That'd be a good question.
We have talked a lot about it. I know that we are sort of, we were never thinking about live when we're recording this thing. It's sort of an afterthought, but a really exciting one. I know that I might be like the weakest link in that because I'm not like able to tour as much, just with like how life is. And I know that they are actually looking to do at least like extensive touring for like shorter periods of time. Definitely looking to do that. But I mean, if we are doing some festival dates and like where it is maybe in Europe rather than in like Australia or in the US for long periods of times, I'm going to definitely try to make as many shows as possible. But we're talking about it this very minute. Yeah.
Cool.
That would be like, it's going to be weird doing this thing live, because personally for me, I mean, I don't know, I haven't played this type of music before, so for me this whole thing was like a math test. It was like the hardest stuff I've ever played, and I really need to like relearn some of the stuff that is on the record, because it's like, I don't know, I was just sitting with it, you know, when you do one thing for a long while, it's like, you know, when you're studying for a math test, you know it on the day, and then a week later it's just like, I don't remember anything. Yeah. So it's probably do you remember the band Tomahawk? It was like Mike. Yeah. I saw them live with like a massive fever. That was one of the most like, it was like too much information for my brain. But I remember just Buzz Osborne's like comment on like in an interview, like, how is this to record and like rehearse? Because it's like, it's kind of complicated music, huh? And he was like, you know what? After a while, you get so fucking annoyed by like playing the wrong thing, you start playing the right thing. so it's that was sort of the way it was with me with this. It's just like, after a while, it's just like, I've now like just hit my head in the wall like 200 times over, and finally just like, okay, that was a good take. And then you're just done, and it's not like, let's not do this for a while again. But yeah, live will definitely I will definitely sit down and study the stuff, and it's gonna be good. But we'll see. I mean, we might announce something pretty soon, actually.
Awesome.
All right, if there's nothing else, let's go around and you can plug whatever you've been up to and tell us what to expect next from all of you. Garney, you can kick us off if you're ready.
Yeah, How Does Your Queen, the record will be out in May. It was mixed and mastered by the amazing Daniel Leiden as well in Sweden. So we're excited about that. That should be, like I said, I think May 31st will be the date we're looking at releasing it. And then, of course, Ripplefest Texas, the lineup is being unveiled daily. So depending on when this comes out, there may be a lot of the lineup. A lot of Swedish influence I've brought over this year, and we're excited about it.
That's super exciting, yeah. Eddy.
The Endless debut album just came out on January 23rd, so anybody go check it out. And still working on music for Lotoc and Aiwass next album. That's about it.
Right. Peder, what are you up to?
I've released a record with a band called Slower.
Got it.
Right on. Cool.
It is Barry Manilow tracks played really fast on a clarinet.
Idea.
Yeah. No, I'm working on where we're recording the next Lowrider release, which is a split EP with Elephant Tree. We are doing 5 tracks, so it's like, and some of them are very long.
So it's like a whole Slower album.
Yeah, I realized like, fuck, I did it again, because I mean the thing with Refractions, our latest album, was supposed to be an EP, and then it's just like started recording. It was like, oh man, this is a full length, and we're starting to paint ourselves into the same corner here. But yeah, we're doing that, and then simultaneously we've started working on the actual full length album that is coming after that. So it's a lot of songs in the bag that we need to record.
You got a date in mind for the split?
It's going to come out later this year. probably fall, because it's part of the post-wax subscription service. So it's people in post-wax are getting it first in a special packaging, and then it's going to release officially. So it's going to be hopefully like maybe August for subscribers, and then maybe September, October for everyone else. And then I'm doing tons of like other stuff, but we'll see where that ends up.
Since we're talking about Slower, where can everybody get Slower? You got vinyl available?
It's they've got like a different couple pressings of it. There's vinyl, there's CD, there's digital. It's on all streaming platforms. Go support it. It's just go to Slower666 on Instagram. I think you can get all the info you need.
Awesome. Aawks.
We got a bunch of shows coming up. Check our socials for all the details. And second album is 98% written. I keep going back and rewriting stuff and augmenting stuff and moving stuff around and all that kind of thing. But it's more or less there. We introduced our new bass player at a Montreal show a couple weeks back and went really well. That's pretty much it. We're busy, super busy. Looking forward to a good solid year.
Right on. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Peder. Everybody go check out Slower.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Awesome job, guys.
Later.